Hello and welcome to the first of a two-part series known as Parenting with Empathy. I'm Jennifer and I will be your workshop leader today. We will be going through a series of slides, and in those slides there will be a few videos where we will hope to illuminate the topic a little bit more and give you some new perspectives on how to be more empathetic in your parenting. Okay. Parenting with Empathy, Class 1. How to build a lifelong bridge between yourself and your child. We have 3 goals today. The first is to understand what empathy is. The second is to learn more about how to develop and practice empathy with yourself and for your children. And then finally, to learn how to teach and encourage empathy in your children. So what is empathy? Hint, it's not about feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is the ability for one person to perceive emotions, needs, and desires of another. Another way of saying this is being able to walk in another person's shoes. When it comes to empathy in parenting, it is the ability of parents to understand our children's emotions and desires and to be able to respond in a nurturing and caring and empathetic way. Empathy is not the same as sympathy, pity, or sadness for another. So we're actually going to watch a short video, and the maker of this video is Brene Brown. And you might have heard of her. She is a fairly successful author, and she writes about empathy. So hopefully this will give you a little more insight into the difference between empathy and sympathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, No, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I had it, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If if I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, "Wow, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me." Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Hopefully that video gave you a little more of an understanding of the difference between empathy and sympathy. Like Brene Brown says, there are 4 qualities of empathy. One is perspective taking, or seeing things from another's point of view. Staying out of judgment, so not labeling the feeling or the situation as good or bad, right or wrong. 3, recognizing the emotion in the other person. And then finally, naming that emotion. Like was mentioned in the video, empathy is feeling with someone. It is being present to their pain or their discomfort and not trying to fix it or mask it or even change the person's perspective. It's really just offering up ourselves as someone who cares and commiserates with the pain of the person that we are trying to empathize with. So in this slide, the one kitty is empathizing with the other because their food was changed to the generic brand. So you can see that the response from the little white kitty is that they're offering themselves up and showing empathy by not trying to fix the problem or lessen it, but to connect to something that they understand, something in themselves. And that's also what is mentioned in the video, that empathy requires us to connect to something in ourselves that knows what the other person is feeling. Even if it's not exactly the same, we don't know exactly how it feels to be in their shoes, but we try our best to reach down and find something that connects to that feeling. Now, we can extend all of this understanding of empathy to our parenting. And over the next few slides, we're going to talk about some of the essential parts of parenting with empathy. So the first thing that empathetic parents do is they help their children get their needs met. Now, if you've taken some other classes with us, we have talked about SPICES. It's an acronym, and it describes the 6 universal categories of human needs. And the S stands for social, P for physical, I for intellectual, C for creative, E for emotional, and finally S again for spiritual. So these 6 categories of needs are universal, which means that everyone from young babies to 100-year-olds all have needs in these 6 categories. They might look different from person to person, but everyone has that complexity of needs. So for example, in the social category, the need for friendship or companionship, that's going to look different for a 2-year-old versus a 30-year-old, but they're both going to need companionship in different ways. SPICES and all of those categories remind us that our needs as human beings are very complex. Even our children's needs are complex. And depending on the age of your child, they might be harder to identify. Some needs might be harder to identify than others. For instance, if you have a baby who is not able to speak, you're going to have to do a lot of guesswork and noticing patterns and really empathizing, putting yourself in your child's shoes to find out what their needs are. It takes a lot of time and practice for children to be able to identify their own needs. But the more you help them meet their needs and identify those needs, the better they will become at doing it for themselves. This is a process of gaining self-awareness. The more you engage in this with your child, the more intuitive you will become in sensing what their needs are. Okay, empathetic parents hold and rock their children when they need to be comforted. This might sound obvious. It might sound like something that is instinctual to you, and you might already know to go to your child and provide physical comfort when they are upset. But unfortunately, many parents have been taught that too much physical affection or responding to children's needs will spoil them or will create a quote unquote soft child. But actually the opposite is true. We have a lot of research right now that shows how incredibly important gentle touch is for children. The benefits are, here's a list of the benefits, but they're only the tip of the iceberg. Gentle touch promotes brain development, models positive communication, increases bonding, improves digestion, improves behavior, reduces stress, promotes development, and decreases depression. Healthy touch is what creates neural pathways in our brain, which will help children learn to manage their emotions later. As a counter example to this, we can look at orphanages in Eastern Europe that were so understaffed, had so many children, and were so understaffed that many babies spent the majority of their days alone in their cribs. And this wasn't intentional neglect, but it was just, it was a necessity of the orphanages and how they were being run at the time. But what they found is that these babies had to spend a lot of time alone in their cribs. And although their physical needs were being met, they were bathed, they were clothed, their diapers were changed, they did not thrive because they didn't have this physical touch and bonding from their caregivers. And many of them failed to thrive, and some of them even died because of it. So we can see that gentle touch is not just a bonus. It's not just an extra on top of meeting all of our other needs. It is essential for babies and children to survive. Okay. Empathetic parents also try to figure out what their children are feeling. So parents do this by helping children understand that their feelings, no matter comfortable or uncomfortable, are all valid. All feelings are welcome. So that's number one. Number two is helping them label their feelings and validate them. So helping a child identify what is the feeling. It might be an uncomfortable one, but is it anger, sadness, loneliness? What is it? So they help them name that feeling. And they let them know that that feeling is okay and welcome. And then finally, they help the child identify and ask for their needs to be met. So maybe the feeling is loneliness. What's the need that's not being met? Well, that might be attention from their parents. That might be one-on-one time. So helping your child to be able to say, what is it that they are missing? What is the need that is not being met? This is a skill that takes strong modeling, and it takes a very long time for children to develop this self-awareness and to be able to communicate it to their parents and to others. So if we help them by doing that ourselves, they will be given a strong example of how to do that. one way that you can help them identify feelings and needs is to use needs and feelings to describe your own behavior. So, for example, you might say to your child, I'm feeling very frustrated right now. I need to take a short break in my room so that I can calm down. So that is normalizing the feeling for them. It's okay to feel frustrated, labeling it, and then linking it to a need. And this helps children develop their own empathy because they see that there are needs and feelings in other people. And they learn the importance of meeting those needs. Okay, empathetic parents respond to their children in a caring way. So you have a chance to teach empathy in literally every interaction that you have with your child. So children are likely to feel heard and understood if you're able to listen without interrupting, and if you're able to reflect back what they've said to you. So here's an example of that. It sounds like you're pretty angry right now because your brother knocked down the Lego tower you've been working on all morning. So you're responding to the feeling that your child has expressed to you. So maybe they're not doing it in a calm way. Maybe they're angry and they're yelling it. But when you're reflecting it back, you are calm and you are helping them identify that. The next step would be to validate the feeling, right? So even if we don't like the behavior that our child has had, or even if we find their reasoning irrational, it's extremely important that we validate the feeling, not the behavior, not the action. We validate the feeling. So that would look like this. Yeah, you worked so hard on your creation. I can understand why you would be so mad. So let's say that brother whose tower was knocked down went ahead and hit his younger brother because he was mad about this. You are not responding to the behavior immediately. The first thing you do is to validate the feeling, the anger, the resentment. Validate why that feeling would be appropriate. You can later correct the behavior and work together to find a solution. The first step is empathy and validating, and then we work together to find a solution. So that could look like this. In our family, we use our words to express our feelings. You may not hit your brother, even if you're angry at him. So you've validated the emotion, and now you can talk about the behavior. We don't do that in our family. That goes against our family values. Then you can talk about a solution together. That could be something like this. Sounds like you both owe each other an apology. Afterwards, maybe we can try to repair the situation. Maybe you two can work together to build the tower again. So you can see that the discipline part of this interaction with your child really comes at the end, where you talk about the correct behavior, you offer some different ways for them to express their feelings, and then you can come up with a way to fix things together. Okay. Empathy is an essential piece of parenting, and without it, we cannot connect. Deep connection to a primary caregiver is actually one of the biggest predictors of a child's success, and that is their success emotionally, their success socially, and even academically. Empathy needs to be at the top of our list of parenting goals. But first, we have to develop empathy for ourselves. Now, you might be wondering why. Why do I need to develop empathy for myself to have an empathetic effect on my child? Well, let's start with a quote from the Buddha. If you truly loved yourself, you could never hurt another. Let's think about that. If you truly loved yourself, you could never hurt another. So there's something about loving ourselves first that enables us to love and care for others. We can't care for others without first caring for ourselves. We have to be able to have a calm and grounded response to our children. We can think of it like the instructions when you get on an airplane that say, put on your own oxygen mask before you help others. We can't pour from an empty cup. So this is the first step in empathy for our children, is learning how to develop empathy for ourselves, our actions, our feelings, and even prior feelings and actions. And also think back to the Brene Brown video. She says in that video that in order to have empathy for another, we have to connect to something within ourselves. If we haven't made that connection to ourselves, if we aren't self-aware enough, then we are not going to be able to effectively empathize with others, especially our children. Okay. To help develop empathy for ourselves, we can look at some of the experts on this relatively new field of study known as self-compassion. So one of the experts in self-compassion, Kristen Neff, says that self-compassion has three components. The first is self-kindness, or being able to actively soothe ourselves. The second is recognizing our common humanity, understanding that pain is part of the shared human experience. It's what connects us to other people. And finally, mindfulness, facing the truth of our experience, being connected to now, our reality as is right in front of us. So in our last few slides, we're going to go through these three components of self-compassion and talk about them a little bit more. Okay, self-kindness. So the thing about self-kindness is that it seems a little bit funny to a lot of people. But if we take it back to how we are wired, how humans develop, it can make a little more sense. So like we talked about with babies, babies are strongly wired to connect to their mother or father or caregiver, and to have their development built on connectedness and responsiveness to their needs. So this is how babies develop. This is how we developed. And the truth is we never actually stop having that need for human connection and commiseration. There was actually a study done several decades ago where scientists took monkeys and they gave baby monkeys who had been removed from their actual monkey mothers, and they gave them two substitute mothers. One of the substitute mothers just had a bottle of milk strapped to it. So it was a dummy monkey, and there was a bottle of milk to it, but strapped to it. But it was hard and metallic, and there wasn't anything to make it feel like a real mother, like a flesh and blood mother. Then some of the monkeys were given a mother that did not have any food or milk attached to it, but they were very soft, they were padded, and they were warm. And what they found the monkeys did was they would go to the monkey mother that did not have any warmth or anything to soothe them, and they would drink from the bottle, and they would quickly run back to the mother that was warm and comforting. And so you can see that these monkeys had it hardwired in them that they needed to have comfort. And one thing we get from this comfort is the hormone known as oxytocin. And oxytocin is what we feel when we're falling in love. We feel this when we hold our babies or when we look at a puppy. Our bodies release this hormone when we have these feelings or when we're feeling connected and loved by someone else. But our bodies also release this hormone when we are loving on ourselves, when we give compassion, love, and understanding to ourselves. So we can actually create this physical, hormonal feeling of being empathized with for ourselves. We can show ourselves love and feel comfort as if it were coming from a trusted friend. Common humanity. Okay. So compassion, this word compassion, it literally means to suffer with. And that is one huge aspect of self-compassion. It is understanding that our pain connects us to the pain of everyone else in the world, that we are not alone in our feelings of suffering, and that it is the pain that actually brings us connection to others. When our identity and our belonging can extend to everyone, the entire human race, then we can actually create less conflict in the world and become more empathetic human beings. When we build strong and meaningful relationships, our shared humanity becomes much more apparent. When we have deep connections with other people and we understand their experience and their pain, we begin to see that we're all made up of the same stuff. And that part of that is pain and suffering, but that we can lessen that by connecting to others. Okay. The last part, the last component of self-compassion is mindfulness. Mindfulness requires us to observe our own thoughts and try to detach from judging them. It's being able to look at our pain or our suffering and try to come to a neutral place, which is not easy when it's our own pain and suffering, but holding our pain and suffering lightly in a way that acknowledges the weight of it, acknowledges that it's real and that it exists within us, but also does not dwell too deeply in your suffering. So it is a really tricky balance. Meditation does not have to be, mindfulness does not have to be meditation. It can look many different ways, but it generally is a practice of coming back to now, coming back to the present moment and noticing what exists right now. So we're going to watch a short video about how mindfulness changes the brain. And you will see that as well as having an external impact on us, mindfulness also has a way of restructuring our brains, our actual physical brains. So we will watch this video and then we will do a mindfulness activity.
Skills of mindfulness, we still experience negative feelings like frustration, disappointment, fear, or irritability. But the research shows that we recover much more quickly. We now know from research into
That started in the middle.
The human brain is a profoundly complex organ. 90% of its activity occurs beneath conscious awareness, which means that even though we assume that we have some control of how we think, feel, and behave, modern science suggests it's not so simple. The concept of neuroplasticity is a new and exciting area of science. It highlights that our brain is constantly being reshaped throughout our lives by both our experiences and our thoughts. We now know that it is the focus of our awareness that determines which brain networks are strengthened and which are weakened or lost. That means that when we get caught up in cycles of worry or irritability, these are the networks within the brain that become stronger. So the more we worry, the better we become at worrying. However, on the other side of this, if we practice being calm, clear, and focused, we can strengthen these networks too. As humans, our brain differs from other animals. This is mostly due to the front areas of the brain called the frontal lobes, often called the new brain, as it was the last to develop in our evolution. When well developed, this part of our brain helps us to manage our strong emotions and respond with flexibility, even when we feel overwhelmed. It also helps us to tune into the feelings of others with empathy and insight. When we feel worried, distracted, or stuck on achieving goals, our brain function is more strongly dominated by our old brain, which has a part called the amygdala. The amygdala matches the powerful fight and flight response, which switches on when we feel stressed or anxious and releases hormones and chemicals such as cortisol and adrenaline. That is why stress has such a big impact on us. Mindfulness is a technique that can help us to manage this process more effectively by building our skills of attention, concentration, and a capacity to direct our awareness in a certain way. This all means that we're less likely to be swept up by a strong emotion and the power of the amygdala. It also means we can bring choice to our emotions and our thoughts. In doing so, we're playing an active role in changing the way the structure of our brain develops, in much the same way we can change the shape of our body by doing certain exercises at the gym. When we practice meditation regularly, we build a capacity to become aware of thinking and emotion. As our mind becomes more settled, our nervous system is able to take in more accurate information, and we can access capacities for creativity, flexibility, and lateral thinking, which enable us to manage challenging situations more skillfully. When we build skills of mindfulness, we still experience negative feelings like frustration, disappointment, fear, or irritability. But the research shows that we recover much more quickly. We now know from research into brain development that regular meditation and mindfulness practice reduces the size of the amygdala, reduces levels of stress hormones, and strengthens connections to the frontal lobes. This all means that we're more likely to live with less stress and more happiness.
So I hope that video showed you some of the benefits of mindfulness, which include kind of growing this muscle of empathy, not a physical muscle, but the muscle that helps us connect to empathy first before we have reactions. It also helps us to empathize with others and think more logically about how we will respond. For the last part of this class, we will do a mindfulness exercise together. So this is called the 5-4-3-2-1 method, and I practice this one often, and it is a really straightforward and uncomplicated way to practice mindfulness in your everyday life.
The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method is a grounding exercise that can help you stay in the moment and avoid negative thinking and worry. You can do this exercise anywhere, at home, at school, in the car, or even in the middle of a crowd. You can do it sitting, standing, or laying down. Counting down from 5, use your senses to list things around you. Make to notice details about these things. This is how to do it. Start by breathing deeply in through your nose and out through your mouth. Then slowly look at your surroundings. Find 5 things that you can see around you. Maybe you see a colorful poster on the wall, the spider web on the bookshelf, the lamp on the nightstand with the red shade, the cat sleeping peacefully on the chair, the cactus on the dresser that has finally bloomed. Then list 4 things that you can touch. The warm mug in your hand, the soft comforter on the bed, the denim of your jeans, the scratchy carpet under your feet. Next, listen for 3 things you can hear. Maybe the ticking of a clock, the quiet hum of your computer, the sound of traffic from outside. Now try to find 2 things that you can smell. The tea in your mug, the clean scent of your clothes. Finally, list 1 emotion that you feel. This is a way to ground yourself so you can feel present in the moment and in control of your surroundings. Now you try.
I hope you enjoyed that exercise. It's one of my favorites for grounding and coming back to the present moment. This is the end of part 1 of Parenting with Empathy. And I'm going to leave you with one small task and also a really helpful resource. So I'm going to show you something called our Padlet, and it's all about it's an online bulletin board that has all of the resources from this class and the next class in this series. And it includes a link to this video, which you might do as homework. And it's a kind wishes practice. And this is something that you can actually do with your children. It's a mindfulness practice that is really accessible to people of all ages. So I'm going to show you that Padlet. And here's the Padlet, and it's organized by weeks. And week 1 has a few of the videos from our class today. And you can find that kind wishes exercise down at the bottom here, all the way down under week 1. Here are some of the resources that we will go over in the second part of Parenting with Empathy. And then there are several headings here that have some mindfulness practices for you. So Parenting pauses comes from Kristen Neff, who we spoke about in this class, who writes about self-compassion. So she has created these parenting pauses. There are some journal exercises also from her, as well as mindful moments. These audio exercises from self-compassion are great if you really want to be guided through a meditation. And then here are just some extra articles and resources that you can check out. So the link to this Padlet, as well as the password for it, will be in the notes of this video. And so you can access them at your convenience. So that's it for week 1 of Parenting with Empathy, and I will see you for week 2 very soon. Thank you so much.